In this chapter of Coleman On Purpose, I'm discussing what toxic singleness looks like to me and how I was able to navigate and balance my life at some of my lowest points. We take a dip into what healthy self-healing and unhealthy isolation look like in my life. Also, I'm sharing an enlightening story relating to our discussion in the previous chapter. Purpose Podcasting begins right now on COP. Welcome to another chapter of Coleman On Purpose. This is David J. Coleman here, and we are ready to start a really great chapter here called Toxic Singleness. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you to all of those that tune in each and every time I post up a podcast chapter. It means the world to me, and I'm learning along this journey and this process that even though I began this process just like jotting down notes and different things like that, now I can see myself really coming into my own on this podcast. Like, I'm not just writing notes, I'm writing sentences, and it's almost like you're writing a book in a way. And so I just look at this podcast as an expression of being able to talk out my feelings and also talk out feelings that others have expressed or things that have just been on my mind for a long time that I just want to get out there, and anybody that wants to hear it and just not just learn from it, but just take it in and think about the different ways that we think about things in the world, and just having a difference of thought sometimes. And we're so programmed to thinking the same way in our world that if people start to think differently, I really do think that affects purpose, that affects change, that affects different things that people see in themselves. So it's great to be that way. It's great to be different. It's great to have different opinions on things or different ways of thinking. That's kind of how I look at this and how I approach it. So this chapter, like I said, is called Toxic Singleness. And before I begin, I want to give a quick disclaimer. Sometimes I'm hesitant about doing like relationship type, chapters, but it's important because even though I may have just walked through something or just had the experiences recently or a long time ago, I think it's important to talk about them. So before I begin, I just want to say this. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being or staying single. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I do feel like in this society, we are so used to seeing relationships with people that have a person to complete them, or they have that person there that they say, this is the person that is going to help me walk through this next part or this next portion of my life. That is great. That is wonderful. I have been in a marriage before, so I know that there are important parts and pieces, but when you feel like you are unable to complete that thing without that person, that's where I see those problems. I think that each person is supposed to add to one another on both ends. It's not just supposed to be one person pushing something along or another person pushing someone along. There are both great values that both people have when they are together, and that's how I look at it. Even with friendships, there are values that each person gets from one another. So I just feel like that has become type of a norm that we see now. A lot of things are kind of being broken a little bit. You can see little people here and there from the newer generation basically saying they can do it on their own. They can be independent. We had a movement like that maybe back in 2000. I remember there was like an independent women, like shout out to Destiny's Child. There was an independent women movement where they talked about independence, but it really wasn't shown. When you think about it, it was sung about, it was talked about, it was pushed, but the examples that were in front of us were not actually matching up with what we were hearing. And we hear a lot of that nowadays with a lot of things that we see on TV or hear, and it doesn't sometimes match up with what is being preached or talked about. But there are differences. There are differences with healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. In my mind, my ideal healthy relationship would be being there for one another when you need them. No one ever being burdened with a heavy responsibility that they aren't able to handle at the time. Help when you can, or help as much as you can. Being a provider when you can. You should be able to do what you need to do to provide the best way that you can for that person. And that's not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, but that is the most when you look at it, it's like being so pure in nature and just letting it happen a natural way. That's what I look at as being healthy. There's so many different aspects that it comes to when having a healthy relationship. To me, an unhealthy relationship would be becoming, like I said, overly dependent on your partner or your loved one for their happiness, stability, and their inner peace. When you are searching for a inner peace from someone else, there might be something that you need to like figure out. That's what I had to figure out basically on my own. I was like, there were many things that I couldn't find peace within myself. So I can't find peace with anyone else if I can't even find peace within myself. If I'm not being honest with myself, if I'm not being truthful with myself, if I'm not being the me that I can be, it's not going to benefit me being with another person. So many times being on both ends of those spectrums, even in not just romantic relationships, friendships also, I've been on both ends of those spectrums. I didn't start to really think about my life or settling down in a relationship until after college. So even in those moments when I knew I wanted to be maybe in a relationship, I didn't really start looking at relationships seriously till around college, when I started to see people get engaged, when they started to get linked with people that they would stay with for the 4 years and then talk about life after that. That's when you really start to see them. That's why I think that even college is like a training ground for what you see, because that's when you have a whole bunch of girls and guys and girls and guys, everybody coming together to really explore themselves and really become who they are. I really do think that at a younger age, you may be serious about it. Like when you look at people in high school, sometimes you see that there are circumstances and different things that come along that might make you be a responsible person, maybe having a child as a teenager or something like that during high school or something that kind of forces you into an area of being with the person. But I've always said, even back then, just because either you had a child with someone from back then, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's who you're supposed to be with. That's something that may have been forced upon us because that's what families always, want. Whoever you laid down with, that's who you need to be with. That's what that person you need to be with. Or if you spent a whole bunch of time with this person and y'all are like shacking up or doing however they like to say in many ways, then y'all need to be together. Stop doing all this pity patting. But a lot of times, there needs to be a clear idea of what you want from that person. And sometimes as we're younger, we don't really realize that. We just walk into these relationships and sometimes they are very, very unhealthy. And so I got married directly out of college. I waited maybe a few months after I graduated and I got married. And I will say, I have always said this and I will continue to say this: I don't regret a moment of the time that I was married. There were so many things that I had to learn. There were so many things that I had been through. There were so many things that I was growing from that I needed to find out about, myself. And marriage really, really helped me to even discover more of myself, the things I liked, the things that I didn't like, the things that I wanted to be. I do feel like during that time, there were many changes and realizations that I was going through, and it gave me a different outlook on life or where I was at in that period of time in my life. I kind of want to not delve too far into the marriage part of it because I do have some very special guests that are going to be getting on this show that you are going to really enjoy. And it'll actually be great to see both perspectives when I do get that guest on here to actually break down or possibly even help each other through similar situations about connecting purpose with marriage. So I don't want to delve too far down that road of marriage, but I just wanted to say that people change during marriage. People change and they become different. And sometimes those differences are not that big. So it allows the person to be like, we're fine. We can do this. We can work this out. But sometimes the differences in someone else's mind can become so strong that it's like, I have to be myself. This is it's too much. I got to be myself. And So I began to live life after marriage by myself. And that's not easy at all when you go from being with someone 24/7 all the time to living life by yourself. But along the road, you start to become a little bit comfortable with it. Now, I don't think that I I don't think that I did every single thing correctly as far as when I was divorcing and stuff like that. Like I would have probably done counseling straight out. I would probably wouldn't be uncomfortable being by myself. So I looked for other people or relationships to kind of ease the pain, or I would just like, oh, I need a friend here, I need a friend there, I need to have people around me. And I was living in an environment where I had people around me all the time. So I never really had a chance to really sit by myself and learn things. Even though I was living by myself, I wasn't by myself. So it really didn't give me a chance to really take a lot of this in, coming out of something as so strong as what marriage is. Marriage is a very strong thing. So I think that it allowed me to be, by myself, but I really wasn't in a way. So even through those times, I was starting to get, after I got out of being around people and I got my own place and stuff like that, I started to be comfortable with myself because I was here by myself. So I started to get comfortable with like, oh, okay, this kind of feels good. Just being able to like hear my thoughts, to hear what I'm thinking, nobody calling me, nobody letting me know that they need me right now. It's just like I'm on my own. So at a point in time, I started getting really comfortable with this, so that when other things would come up or people would try to like befriend me, or there would be other types of things that could have possibly been a relationship or stuff like that, I would kind of get away from me. Go, 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 go. I want to be by myself and I just want to stay in this bubble. And this is what I want to call toxic singleness. And it's nothing wrong with just being in your bubble. Like I said at the very beginning, there's nothing wrong with it, but it was almost like a form of isolation. Some people, I call it toxic singleness. Some people call it isolation. So this could be called isolation, but I just thought toxic singleness sounded a lot better, because being isolated is, to me, it can be very, very damaging to a person, and you don't even realize it's happening around you until you find yourself either sitting in dark places, or just finding yourself like not wanting to go out and socialize, or finding yourself in a place where you want to be around maybe just one person, but only a person that might make you just feel comfortable in that moment. You don't want to really be around anyone else, and you're giving, that is unhealthy, and that can be very toxic at times if you're not allowing other people in your life. You're starting to distance. Families are not always the best to be around either, so sometimes distancing family is good, but not, you should still have a family outside of family, even if you are trying to distance yourself from family. I've never really had that problem because I've always been close with my family, but I do find times where I do isolate myself, and I won't call for a little while, but when I get those triggers, or I feel those moments when I'm like, I just don't want anybody around me, or just nobody can talk to me, or I'm not feeling like talking and I'm just staying in my own world, I got to check myself real quick and snap out of it, because in those moments you can get very depressed, you can get very down on yourself, you can overthink things, you can really get into a darker place that you don't want to be. And that's what I call, just toxic singleness, where it's not healthy for you to be I'm not talking about just single in relationships. I'm talking about single from friendships, single from everything that's around you. Those are the times when you really got to look at yourself and say, is this actually healthy? So being single is one thing, but isolating relationships in the outside world because you are comfortable with yourself can be very difficult to navigate, in my opinion. And I always say that, I always preface that when I'm talking about things, because I don't ever want to talk down or make anyone feel a certain way about what is being said, because these are opinions, these are experiences that I've had, that I've walked through, that I've gone through. I'm just telling you what has helped me to find my purpose, what has helped me to bring me through difficult times or seasons when I really wasn't feeling that well. I think I had to learn in my season of singleness that if I didn't learn to have healthy appreciation of myself, I would repeat patterns. So even though I was being, I was in a place where I felt like it was isolation, I had to separate my isolation from working on myself during those times and still having relationships outside of people. And so even in those times when you're on your own, or you don't feel like you have many friends around, or you're not in a relationship, I do feel like it's important to work on those using those healthy ways of working on yourself. It's going to be the most beneficial thing for you in the long run, and even looking and searching and finding your purpose in all of that. I do feel like that nowadays, one of my greatest fears is repeating patterns, or going through something over and over and over and over again. I do feel like there are lessons learned, and if you have learned lessons from the past patterns and you can walk in a healthy way, that is fine. That is great. That is good. But I do feel like I've had to over time find the most authentic relationships, and in those authentic relationships, I've been able to know when a person is benefiting my growth, or when it's taking away from me growing. And a lot of times we have to learn that along our journey and see what is best for us during this time. I always say that in every single relationship, that even if you do repeat a pattern, or you learn a lesson and it has to be learned over and over again, just know that you are still growing, that you still are pursuing something that is greater than yourself. When you see something in a relationship or a friendship, or someone that you're with, or that you've grown with, or that you said, thank you for helping me out of this season of being on my own, and now that you are here, what can we do to better ourselves moving forward? What can we do to make sure that we reach our highest potential on this planet? What can we do in friendships, in relationships, in all of these things? This is what you should surround yourself with when you're talking about purpose. Of course, it's great to find yourself. Of course, it's great to know that you are being the healthiest form of yourself. But if you're having to isolate yourself in order to do that, I think that can be damaging to you as a individual. That can hurt more than help. Now, if you've had experiences where you've been hurt by the same person over and over and over again, I am not saying walk back into those situations. I'm not saying run back to the things that were toxic and then then just stay all with them all the time, because that's going to be the best thing for you to do. That's not what the best thing for you to do is. It's to get out of that situation, but also look and still search on the outside for not just someone to be around, but someone who you can impact, who you can speak into, who you can give life to while you're with that person, that friend, that relationship, that thing that is there. I think a lot of times we miss those opportunities to do that because we are in our little bubble, and that we are trying to stay so laser focused that we can't even see who is there to benefit us at that moment, and who is there to just take us out of our element. We can't realize it sometimes because we are so blinded by either one, trying to be with someone and just making it like I need to be with somebody just because, or in those situations where you're like, I just don't want to find anyone else at this time because I've been hurt too many times and I don't want to be out of there. There's such a balance to where you should go with those things. And so I think in these moments, we have to realize that being single, being on your own is a beautiful thing because you get to realize yourself. But there also should come moments where we say, what else, what other environment, what other community do I need around me in order to make sure that I am healthy and I'm whole, and that I am still going after the purpose and the purpose that I was intended to in life. I hope you've enjoyed this chapter of Coleman on Purpose. This was a very interesting chapter that I got to discuss because I really have been kind of in and out of a season of singleness since I was I say high school. So it was very touching for me to even like talk about some of these things, because it's kind of hard to talk about sometimes, because you walk through things so many times and you want to just get to that point where you break through with it. But this was a very personal episode for me, or chapter for me, and I really wanted to make it known. I'm finding that each chapter that I'm doing, I'm experiencing, I'm realizing, and sometimes I got to do them in real time. And so I wanted to make sure that I did this and I talked about it, because even though I'm walking into new seasons now, I know that there is a reason why I'm bringing these things to the forefront or to the table each and every chapter that I have on this podcast. I'm walking through things daily. Like even last couple weeks ago, I went to my barber, and I had been going to my barber for like 12 to 13 years. Like I said, I had that episode about release for a reason, and that was for a reason, because I sometimes have trouble with releasing, even somebody I've been going to for a long time. But this was a very old school barbershop. They didn't have appointments, so you would kind of just go in, and you would have to sit there sometimes about 2.5, 3 hours sometimes waiting, because it's so full if you go on certain days. So this particular time I had called and said, can I come in? Can I come in? Can I come in? And I ended up going in, and by the time I got there, it was full with like 5 people. He was like, well, can you come back on like Wednesday? It was like a Monday. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll come back. But I never went back, because I was like, David, what is keeping you from going to another barber, one that is right around the street? You don't have to drive 25 minutes out the way to go to this barber, because you're trying to stay faithful to that person. That person is not hurting for money. They will be fine. So I went up to another barber this time, and I will tell you, getting this, I don't need it for my hair. I don't need it for my hair. But when I got that release to go and get my beard at another, my beard cut at another barber, or trimmed up, it was a sigh of relief. It was less stressful. I was in and out, and it was just a good feeling. And I know that's probably where I'm going to continue to go from now on. But it just takes that stepping out and doing something and releasing somebody for a reason, because it gave me more time to do what I need to do. So it can be the simplest things that I'm learning from each and every single week on this podcast when I'm doing it. And I really appreciate y'all for listening. Please make sure you follow me on all the different platforms. Instagram, I'm on there at Deluxe Dave, DeluxeDave. I post things on there, as well as things about just me in general on that site. Also, you can follow me on TikTok. I've made it easier for you to find me on TikTok now. I have a username, which is still Deluxe Dave, just like on Instagram. Or you can still type in the old link, which was davidj.coleman. So davidj.coleman. You can follow me on TikTok, or go directly to the Coleman On Purpose page on TikTok at Coleman On Purpose. And you can find links and different videos and clips from other chapters of Coleman On Purpose. If you don't go to Instagram or Facebook or anything like that, you can make sure you go there. I would love to thank you for joining me for this chapter of Coleman On Purpose. Please remember that you are unique, you are loved, and you are created for greatness. Till the next chapter, holla.